Alright, hello, and thank you for watching this new video here at the Museum Modeler channel. This is going to be a video that I've been looking forward to doing for a long time. It is a sea base tutorial. I've done ocean bases for a number of kits now, and every time I've attempted to document how I do this using a video, something goes awry. And so this is going to hopefully come out a lot better than the previous versions did. I got a new camera, new setup, and ready to go. This is actually a kit that may look familiar to you. I built her, gosh, almost 2 years ago. It's USS Lexington. It is the Trumpeter 1700 kit, showing the ship as she appeared in May 1942. It's been finished for a nice long time. And I'm going to be moving soon, and boxing up kits, finished kits, is a real pain if you want to keep them safe. And having a base for them makes it a lot better. So I've thrown together this base, we're going to make an ocean for it, and it's a good opportunity to look at the process that I use. What this is, it's mounted on just a regular plaque base, picked up from Michael's. See there at the bottom. Nothing special about it, just a regular plaque base. Use whatever style suits you. I stained it and then went over with a nice coat of ocean blue shades. I've got a couple of rattle cans in the garage of different teals and blues, and just mix it up. I mean, the ocean, it's not going to be perfectly uniform. You're going to have darker patches and lighter patches. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's however you want it to look. As I'm depicting the ship in the morning in May 1942 in the Coral Sea, so I went with a lighter, more teal-ish shade of blue. So before you get started, go ahead and, of course, color your base and secure your ship. Lexington here is super glued down, so she's not going anywhere. And the other thing you're going to need is Liquitex Gloss Gel. Put that here. So this is what I've used successfully a number of times now. I've heard that you can use regular home improvement store silicone in the tube to an equal effect. I can't vouch for it. I'm going to try it soon, but since I've got a good bit of this Liquitex left over, I might as well use it since I know it works. You want this because it's thick, which means it's going to be sculptable to a pretty good extent on the first coat, and more so, of course, afterwards. And it dries clear. When you put it on, it's going to look white and pasty, and you'll think, oh my gosh, I've ruined everything. But don't worry about it because it dries clear. And that's why you have already base coated your ocean colors, because the clear effect is going to let that water look a little bit more transparent. It's going to give it an illusion of depth. If my sound is a little janky, it's because I realized I should show you a finished effect of this, so I stepped away from the camera for a second. I'll put this here. So the technique I'm going to show you is the exact same one I used when I built USS Hornet right here, the 1/700 scale. The base was pre-colored, and the Liquitex went up on top of it. And so using this technique, with a little bit of luck, hopefully you can get something that suits what you are going for. The white caps, by the way, are things you add afterwards. So don't see this and say, ah, he said it dries transparent, but it looks white. That's something you put on after the fact. All right, so Hornet's back in her case. Let me go ahead and get a few things situated here, and we'll come back for part 2 of our video. All right, so I've gotten a few things prepped up here. First, reference material. I recommend you have some on hand. I'm using this picture of Lexington from Steve Wiper's Warship Pictorials book on the topic, and that way you can see the basics of the wake pattern that your ship made. Every ship's looked a little bit different, and having references is certainly handy. Not required, but I think it's a plus. All right, open up the Liquitex and see if I can put this here without smashing things. There you go. It looks like mayonnaise, right? It's just this thick, creamy, gelatinous glob. And I've got a little putty knife here. You can see, I mean, basically it's the consistency of thick white glue. And yeah, you don't need to mix it or stir it around. It's ready to go right outside of the can. So you pick a spot and you start going. It's all that there is to it. You start applying it where you want there to be water, which of course is everywhere but where there's ship. Now this is the trickiest part of using Liquitex, which is getting it right up against the hull of your ship. Because if you splatter it, or you're using a tool that's too heavily coated in Liquitex, you're going to wind up getting it up on the hull itself. Let me see if I can show you that. And you don't want that, because then you're going to get dried patches of gloss along your hull. You might think to yourself, oh, it's just going to look like the hull's got some water spray, but really, there's very few ways I've found of making that look just right. You can sort of cover it up with a little bit of matte varnish or some creative paintwork, but try to avoid getting it actually on the hull of your ship above the boot topping or the water line. See, it's coming on there. And because I'm filming this with my arms around my Surface tablet, it's not exactly the least awkward position. So what I'm probably going to do is pause the video in a second, keep working on this, and then come back once we've got most of the base done, ready to start sculpting the waves. Okay, let me go ahead and do that. All right, so about 20 minutes have gone by, and you can see here that the area around Lexington's boot stripe is done, as well as the rest of the water surface. Right now, it's all just about coverage. There's no finesse in this first step, which is why you see all these nasty putty knife strokes. It's at this point that we're going to go ahead and start cleaning things up and adding in some wave texture if we can. So first off, go over areas that look too man-made, you know, these areas that are really flat, and start roughing them up a little bit. I should note that the working time for Liquitex is very long, many hours. This thing isn't going to be able to really be called done until it's cured, which could take, depending on the thickness of it, 24 to 48 hours. I'm not putting this on too thick, so hopefully I can film and upload part 2 of this tutorial tomorrow. But you want random wave patterns, and you want to also base them off of what your ship was in at the time it's being represented. The pictures from the morning of Lexington's strike at Coral Sea show up not perfectly smooth sea, but also not stormy or anything either. So just light chop. Now the thicker you lay this on, the longer it's going to take to dry, and the less transparent it's going to be. In fact, there will be parts of this when it's fully cured that still have tiny white specks in it. From what I can tell, those are air bubbles that are trapped within the Liquitex. So you want to smush those out as best you can. Now I have seen some people who use a similar technique to this, using a spoon and flick it against the Liquitex to create a random wavy effect. That's fantastic. It comes out looking great. Downside is if you do that with your ship in the water, you're going to splash Liquitex up all over it. And they're going to have gloss patterns all over your ship in places you don't want. So that's no good. Okay, now as I'm doing this, you can also see that this water looks really frothy and super choppy. That's creating little points and ridges, unnatural looking water. And that's okay, because this is a several day process. What you're going to want to do, about 6 to 10 to 12 hours, I suppose you could wait as long as 12 to 15 hours afterwards, but after you put on this initial coat, is come through and using your fingertip or some other small pointable appendage, push down on these wave caps if you've got like a chisel blade or something, whatever works. But you're going to push down on them, and you'll see that after that length of time, the Liquitex is certainly solid, but it's malleable. Right now, you're working with a thick gel paste, but after that length of time, 6 to 10 hours, it's going to be solid enough to where it will it'll resist somewhat when you push against it, but it won't be how do I put it? It won't be perfectly solid. This is an acrylic here that when it cures is solid, but for the first while you still got a good work time. All right, so you can see what I've done there is mash up the water a good bit. Try to get rid of these flat areas. And I'm doing this just by taking this putty knife and smushing things around. If it seems like it's a really thick area, you can thin it out a bit, and that'll reduce the time it takes to cure as well. All right, so having done this, oops, there's an area of coverage missing right there. Coverage is important because you'll be able to see, even though the Liquitex is transparent, you will be able to see where it is and is not on your board, and you don't want just bare wood showing there. There you go. Okay, so once you've done this, you're going to actually start sculpting wake forms, which is where your references come into play. Looking at Lexington's profile here, let me put this down and move this over. There we go. You can see basically forward of the crane on her flight deck, where the 8-inch turrets used to be, is where you really start to see her main wake form bulge out from the bow. And then you've got the cross wakes, don't ask me the technical terms, but where you start to see the white choppiness in line roughly with the island leading back to the funnel, and then the waves sort of smooth out again. So you've got that area of turbulence where, let me let that go there, where the waters are crossing each other, some going this way, others coming that way, and you've got that sort of choppy, disturbed area amidships. And that's what you're going to do your best, or at least I'm going to do my best here to sculpt. So let me clean my knife a little bit. As this Liquitex builds up on your putty knife, it becomes a lot harder to work with, so just wipe it off on a towel while it's still workable. Find where your waves are going to be and start building them out. Now this is the sort of thing that I'm going to highlight with whitecaps later on. So I'm just going for texture here. All I'm doing is trying to form out the basic texture of the ship's waveform so that I've got a foundation upon which to paint later. Get a little more Liquitex there. Push that in. There we go. That's actually pretty good for the first try. Also, this part of the ship's wake tends to have some more linear flow to it. You'll see more straight lines with the churning action that's kicked up by the ship. Okay, pull a little bit too far from the hull there, so push it back. So you see, this stuff is really forgiving. You got a good amount of time you can play with it. Hours and hours, like I said. Okay. Push it back in against the hull. There we are. Let me see if I can't angle the ship up now. You can see what I just did. So right there, you can see how I've added in the basic form of a wave pattern. Looking at this on the camera, it looks very honeycomby. So I'm gonna have to smush down some of these ridges, because again, that's not entirely natural. It's gonna look, less obvious as it cures, but right now, I'm not feeling it too much. So smush that out. That's better. All right, and that's really all you're gonna do. You wanna work on this for your bow waveforms, for your prop wash at the stern, and the angular spray at the bow peak, which is, I think, the hardest part, since it has a very complex sort of, it pulls out and away from the bow and also moves backwards, and that might take several coats. Luckily, you can coat Liquitex on Liquitex with no adverse effects with the way it appears, so you can build up a foundation, and then the next day put a little more on, the next day a little bit more on, until you have a wake form. That'll about do it for this video. I'm going to keep working on this here, let it cure for a while. Again, I'll push down those peaks in a couple of hours and record another video tomorrow. I'll try to get this uploaded tonight so we can have a part 1 ready to go. If you have questions or comments, put them here below the video, or you can hit the Facebook page or the blog, museummodeler.wordpress.com. And hopefully this will be helpful and useful for some or all of you. I'll go ahead and keep working on this, and we'll see you tomorrow for part 2.